Hello, everyone, and welcome to another special episode of Black Op Radio. This is Len Osanic, and we are in the Black Op Radio studio tonight, and it's another show that's going to be groundbreaking in this year, 2012, in January. It's around the third week, and we have, again, people in the studio, guests, and I'm going to start with James, Angie, and Canadian Cinderelly, and we are going to talk about the state of JFK research and things that have been going on. You may have heard James a few weeks ago discussing they have a new film, and we'll get into that in a second. Canadian Cinderelly is big on the forums and in JFK research groups. So welcome to the studio, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It's
Len.
awesome to be here.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Len.
Okay, let's start off with the first thing that brought you guys and me together was Fletcher Prouty, and you have a film going on. And just give us maybe a brief background of what the film is, and then what's the state of it today? Where are we? Is it ready? Is it half ready? Or
Oh, okay. Well, with me right here, I have the three basic books that we've based the film on, and we have David Ratcliffe's book right at the top. The original sort of the genesis of the idea that we have is that we wanted to find some way to take what David Ratcliffe had documented in this book and what he had talked about with Fletcher, and express it in a cinematic way. Turn it into a full-out documentary film experience to sort of make it a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier to digest. Because people my age, we don't really read too many books anymore, right? And so that was sort of the idea of the film. And as it stands right now, the film is it's at the point where we can talk about it publicly. It's not totally finished. We're putting the last little bit of finishing touches on it.
okay, and that book is Understanding Special Operations.
That's right. Understanding Special Operations and their impact on the Vietnam War era.
Right.
Well, when I first was introduced to the JFK case, it was when I became James' partner, and he showed me the Zapruder film for the first time, and he also showed me this film project that he was working on, which in his mind was designed to be the first documentary that covered not only JFK's life but his death, because James noticed that all of the documentaries only say cover the assassination and don't go into maybe the causes and effects of his presidency that would have shifted things significantly for people in perhaps opposition to him. And so he basically had two parts of the current film finished. And when I jumped in, it was to basically fully marry that situation with the government power structure in place regarding covert operations in the Cold War.
Right, and seeing excerpts of it, it reminds me of the James Douglas book that these are the reasons. Here's the background, and the important background, because if you just say, like I do, Kennedy was removed by his enemies, well, who are these enemies? And of course people have alluded to it in the film JFK. They say, all the usual suspects of, he was going to smash the CIA in 1,000 pieces, and he was printing his own money, and the Federal Reserve had to be upset. And, of course, people like that, right? Canadian Cinderelly, tell me about your interest in the JFK assassination and what brought you to be, I guess, a fan of Black Op Radio and why you think this is important.
Watch that Zapruder film just once. It'll knock your socks off. I've watched the JFK movie the first time, and it just blew me away. And then I got online on the internet and found out that there was other people like me who realized that, we were not being told the truth by our government. And the rest is history. I haven't been able to stop since. You got to open up one set of eyes each day at least,
So it was a real awakening for you then in that sense that once we can see what's going on, the current events like 9/11 and the losing of the Homeland Security, the TSA, all these things, an average person might not give them as much credibility or weight, but when you study the JFK assassination, you can see, well, when someone runs up against this, the guy is killed. So this is a real power and a real problem today. And first of all, let's learn, and then we'll maybe be a catalyst to suggest alternatives and maybe Well, I'll just leave it as alternatives. We need a better system. It's strange the belittling I see of Ron Paul constantly, and he's like the only guy that ever calling for an accounting, an auditing of the Federal Reserve, among other things, right, with the military budget of the U.S. You have 2 other books there.
Yeah. Angie, because Angie found this book, which is particularly rare, I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about it, if you'd like.
Oh, no, please.
Oh, okay. All right. So this is...
I got it for you.
Yeah, this is Operation Zapata, the ultra-sensitive report and testimony of the Board of Inquiry of the Bay of Pigs. And this book, Colonel Fletcher Prouty used to talk about a lot. That's an original hard copy cover from 1981. Angela found it at a Royal Air Force library in England that was being... They were selling off all of their books.
Show them the library. I'm sorry.
Very cool.
Oh yeah, the Royal Air Force the Air Force library that held it. The library card is still in the back, and no one took this book out in the 30 years that it was in the library. We got it in practically mint condition with a very nice letter from the library staff thanking us for purchasing it, and it's one of the fundamental books that we have based our documentary on. It's just there's absolutely the best information in here on the Bay of Pigs. It highly influenced us, as the film is titled, that whole Bay of Pigs thing, and this book really made our hair stand on end. The second book that we have is not ours. I mean, this is Len's copy, but this is the Foreign Relations of the United States, volume number 4. August to December 1963. And this book was printed in 1993, and it is the official State Department record for that entire period of formulating the foreign policy of the United States government. And these 3 books comprise the basic bulk of the information that we want to document in our film.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, do you have an objective? Like, if you're making a film, do you want to leave the viewer walking with a specific theme that?
Well, the thing that I really wanted to do was to make a really critical and very serious documentary. My personal objective is to make a film that I can show on university campus. I want to create a film for students all over North America who are studying the foreign relations of the United States. Because a lot of this information, regardless of how valid it is, regardless of how useful it is, or how important it is, this information is not normally talked about inside universities. And it's been that way for decades. And just to give you a little anecdote of how this is the case, my grandmother went to university when she was a little bit older in life. She was in her 50s, and she studied foreign relations at the University of Toronto.
In the 80s.
In the
80s.
Yes, in the 80s. She studied at University of Toronto. So this book hadn't been printed yet. And the final exam question for her class, was what would Kennedy have done in Vietnam if he had lived? And my family remembers the Christmas break where she had to type this essay manually, no word processors or anything. And my family talked about how there was no Christmas dinner that year. The whole house was in shambles, and my grandmother was on the edge of a nervous breakdown. And they thought that it was just because the exam was really hard. I got to talk with her later, and the problem is that she couldn't find any information in the university curriculum or in the university library on Kennedy's foreign policy in Vietnam. She couldn't find it. It wasn't there. And she thought she had forgot the notes, that she had lost them somewhere. So when she ran out of time, she decided to write a different essay. The answer she put down was, well, I can't find any information on the Kennedy policy in Vietnam. But I found a whole lot of information on the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if we can look at one example, we could hypothesize what he might have done. And she went back to her class to pick up her exam, convinced that she was going to get an F. Because you can't do that. You can't hypothesize, about history. And at least at university, you're not supposed to. Now, when she got to class, the teacher basically said that every single person in the class but one failed the exam. Like every single person except one. And he said, and that person who succeeded is Margaret Pickard. And my grandmother sat up in her chair and looked over her shoulder because she assumed there must be some other Margaret Pickard in the university class, but it was her exam. Every other student had answered the question, well, Kennedy would have done this, or Kennedy would have done that. Kennedy would have invaded in Vietnam, maybe done even worse than Johnson, or Kennedy would have withdrawn the troops. But all those answers were incorrect because this book had not been printed yet. And most of the kids that I went to school with, despite the fact that this book is printed, they are unaware of the fact that it exists. You know, and so for me, it seemed like low-hanging fruit. You know, I was a fan of Black Op Radio. Black Op Radio made me aware of this information, and I just basically thought, oh man, it would be so cool to make a film to let people know about this.
Yeah. Tell me a little more about some of your contributions to it then.
Well, I realized that it wasn't enough to just go and say, oh, he's been killed, you know, and there's obviously a conspiracy, because that doesn't really help people. Because, like, you know, most of the people in the community, that's where they are anyway. So all he would be doing is, like, bringing in, like, new people into the community, which is great. You know what I mean? It's so important that people, like...
You talking about the research community?
Yeah, I'm talking about bringing more people into the research community.
Right, okay.
And, like, more people just generally, like, understanding what we're talking about, you know? Because, like, there's a lot of real hard, solid, factual information behind this. And it leads to extremely important areas governing the largest country on the planet, you know? And I thought, you know, that it would be useful, just for the sake of the information, to try and understand what Prouty was saying when he said, war is over, you know? The objective in war is gone. Right? And then you're sort of like, well, why is the Cold War happening? Because, you know what I mean? And so my objective was to unravel Kennedy's connection to covert operations in the Cold War. And that led me straight through the secret team, understanding special operations. And now we have changed the title of the film from The Final Analysis to The Final Analysis, That Whole Bay of Pigs thing. Because the Bay of Pigs is the most well-known element of Kennedy's assassination, and it's also connected to Nixon. And it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's also connected to these supposed, you know, like the Bay of Pigs was like a failure in covert operations we're all aware of. And I thought that if we could dissect that properly, then we could learn more about the underlying situation.
Yeah. And as Prouty has mentioned, that Kennedy's real role and his objectives and decisions in that have been maligned. You know, people say, oh, well, Kennedy didn't provide air cover, and that's why the Cubans were mad at him, and when that's not the case at all.
Yes, which is exactly why we have Operation Zapata.
Yeah.
Because this book, Operation Zapata, was only released in 1980, and it's the redacted, but the full report of the Bay of Pigs, you know, study group that Kennedy put in place, you know.
Right.
And it actually...
Arleigh Burke, Bobby Kennedy, Alan Dulles.
Well, this is the thing. I don't mean to say report, because actually it isn't a report. It's just like the minutes of the meetings, you know. The actual report ended up being a letter that Maxwell Taylor sent to Kennedy, and we found out that letter is very similar to NSAM 55.
Right.
And then Taylor became the chairman of the JCS after 55 was delivered to Lemnitzer, right? So we sort of saw the creation of the DIA and SACSA as part of perhaps, I mean, even though that was planned under Eisenhower, as perhaps Kennedy's opening to recontrol covert operations using the military chain of command.
Right. Okay, James, you have something here you want to bring up out of the book?
Yeah, it's just this is the publisher's note, so it's an introduction to the book right at the beginning. It says the narrative and memoranda of the Taylor Committee are presented here with minimal editorial changes from the actual declassified documents. The only changes have been those necessary to ensure uniformity of capitalization, italicization, and other points of style. Obvious spelling and typographical errors have been corrected. Minimal punctuation changes have been made, and only when such changes were deemed essential to clarity. Some of the original transcripts' paragraph indentations were eliminated, and in some cases, run-on paragraphs were broken up into shorter paragraphs, again, but with purpose of clarity. Because the meetings were held at different locations and recorded by different stenographers, the style tends to vary from one meeting to the next. In some cases, the name of the participants precede their comments, and in other case, a statement, response, or question-answer format is used. So the point is, this is the raw discussion, and much of this report has been redacted, but the authors of this book printed this copy as they found it. So it's probably the best book to get in terms of trying to actually study, the core essence of what was happening. I mean, these are the words that they sent to the president and said, "Here you go, Mr. President. Here's our, here's what we think happened."
And very rare. Operation Zapata, and you found it in an Air Force library. No one had taken it out.
Actually, it was from an Air Force library that had cleared their books, and a secondhand store had picked them up. And I went through Abe Books, and I used them as an index and a directory to find this out of print, rare edition, and I got it for like $20. But most importantly, see, like a lot of presidential committees come out, right? And how useful are they, right? I mean, we could name a few that weren't very. But the reason this was useful is because JFK put his brother on the committee, along with Allen Dulles, Walter Beetle Smith, and Arleigh Burke only testified. Yeah, Arleigh Burke. Yeah, that's right. Because Walter Beetle Smith was basically the key witness. And Walter Beetle Smith was the second director of Central Intelligence. He's the one who started the presidential briefs. The first one to actually input intelligence into the daily working life of the president, from covert activities. And so he's basically the final and biggest interview in this book. But, having Allen Dulles versus, and Maxwell Taylor, right? Who's supposedly military, right? And, Allen Dulles is CIA. And then Bobby Kennedy was for the White House. And then Arleigh Burke was really he knew everything. He was
right, and chief of the Navy.
He was chief of naval operations. At what time?
From 55 to 61.
Yeah, and I mean, as Prouty says, the Navy has the deepest and blackest intelligence of all the all the wings. So, it was a good committee, right?
Yeah.
And they come up with a couple good things that are not redacted.
And also, I don't know anyone talking about this historically other than Fletcher Prouty that had really dug into it. And he was, with his great disposition, was able to share with researchers his inside knowledge. I recall he had the original notes from Zapata before it was turned into this book.
Yeah, but, he had the mimeographed copy.
Yeah, so he had the inside scoop on it. And he'd also said that even when people were being called to testify, they would be waiting for an hour or something, so they would be sitting in his room having a coffee, talking with him about what they were going to be discussing, or when they came out, what happened? I had to say this, or I said that, or, and it's a whole story there. But this is a step in the right direction. Now, one thing I'm a little encouraged about is that you guys are relatively young, and this is new youthful research, and, people that you're reaching on news groups and in the forums are very enthused and I think excited to be talking about some of the groundbreaking work being done. And of course, I'm not one to say I want to celebrate the 50th in any kind of celebration, but others don't share that opinion. They think the 50th is going to be a big deal and there'll be a lot of press. And I don't want to rain on that parade. So, my own view is, let's make films, documentaries, radio shows now. Let's not wait till the 50th, but others are planning that. I'm planning on having another conference in Hawaii this year, 2012. So I had a few people last time, but a lot of listenership, a lot of people tuned in live. So hopefully in the next few weeks, I'll be able to announce something more happening again. And as I have said, that I have a real disdain for the city of Dallas, the scene of the crime, the city that was responsible for it. And I think that they have been trying through Gary Mack in the 6th Floor to wiggle around that. It was just repulsive for me to hear that you guys had reported people wearing in Dealey Plaza these shirts that just said Oswald acted alone. And just recall that story.
Oh, yeah. Well, Angela and I went down to Dealey Plaza specifically to meet Robert Grodin and specifically to just see the plaza for the first time because, we got kind of tired of a one-dimensional photograph. We wanted the full 3D experience. But so we went down there and we sort of met everybody. But on the actual day, on the 22nd of November, when everyone came down to the knoll, there was about, I'd say, somewhere between 15 and 25 people who were walking around the plaza with these black shirts with just white writing across, and it just said 3 words like Oswald acted alone.
How many people?
There were at least about 15 to 25.
So roughly 20 people then, right?
Someone was selling these shirts.
An organized effort or giving them away to the employees of a said museum to have a presence there. I mean, Oswald acted alone. I mean, regardless of how many gunshots or where they came from or what happened, right?
When we went down there, we had not yet in 2009 incorporated a lot of the important material from Operation Zapata and from Dave Ratcliffe's books. We had a basic outline of an idea, but we hadn't really filled in the meat of the project. So when I saw these guys with the shirts, I almost lunged for them to be like, no, I need to explain to them. Someone obviously hasn't told them yet.
Yeah.
And Angela, thank God she stopped me. She was like, no, we'll just make a film instead. We'll spend a nice time in Dallas meeting nice people like Robert Grodin. Yeah. But it was tough for sure. It's a tough crowd down there because they're making a lot of money in the plaza. That's people, normal, average people, save money to go down there because they are interested in whatever fashion. Whether they want to try and really dig into the case and try to understand what happened and why, or if they just want to. Go down there simply because it's a part of history, regardless of whether they're for conspiracy or against conspiracy. And there's a whole lot of people down there just willing to absorb them and to take all their money. And, there's a whole ecosystem going on of paraphernalia that can be sold. And we think it's fair to say that at the 50th, for sure, there is going to be a lot of people. And for sure, there's going to be a lot of attention there. And I just think that it's important to understand that kind of attention is going to be there, so that we can hopefully harness it in some way. But I mean, just on a personal note, this film that we've made, we have decided ahead of time that because we want to show it at a university campus, we don't really see too much value in charging for a ticket or in selling DVD copies of this film. I mean, this film, it was fun for us to make, and we'd very much like to share it with as many people as possible, and that means that we'd like to show it for free. So when we look at, the 50th anniversary, we look at the potential for attention. And that's the max that we see it as. Right,
yeah. Well, also, just getting back to Dealey Plaza, I'm astounded about that there would be this organized effort, on behalf of, you can only assume, the 6th Floor Museum, to have people doing that, going through saying Oswald acted alone, and here people put these shirts on and walk through there. You also alluded to the story of when the Dealey Plaza closes.
Oh yeah. Angie and I, the first night that we were there, we were hanging out close to sunset, by the plaza, and right around the grassy knoll where Robert Grodin hangs out. He was not there at the time, and as the mall was closing, the security guards came out and sort of spread out through the whole area, and we asked them. We said, "Hey guys, do we need to go?" And And they said, no, you don't need to go. I mean, mainly we're just out here to make sure that people don't pee in the plaza and that homeless people don't sleep here at night and stuff like that. I mean, they were pretty nice about it for what they were doing. But nevertheless, you know, we got to talking with them, and we found it interesting that they told us that they are not allowed as employees, even just as security guards, they are not allowed as employees to express their opinion on what happened in that plaza. Now, I got to speak with a very young man. He was about 16, 17 years old, working as a security guard. And I asked him, he said, well, I can't tell my opinion, but what's your opinion? And I said, well, my opinion is blah, 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 blah. And I started talking about these books. And in the middle of my sentence, he pointed behind me and said, oh, do you notice what's going on behind you? And I turned around, and the overpass going over, Elm Street, there was a train pulling out, high-grade military tanks. It's just a line of about 2,000, 3,000 tanks just going right over Dealey Plaza. And the security guard said, those are probably going to Afghanistan. So I mean, it's a very interesting
You kind of got a point of an industrialized military complex moving around you, even though there's complaints of the judicial system. That's what they're stuck in.
I can't say it for sure. I can't ever be 100% sure, but I really, truly got the sense that this guy took the opportunity to say to me, hey, I'm not allowed to tell you what my opinion is, but I can point to it. Yeah. It just happens to be moving right behind you. And that, that was one of my favorite events. But I just wanted to say, in addition to that there were a lot of younger people there. There were a lot of new people there as well. And there were a lot of top-level researchers that we didn't really feel capable of approaching. Robert Groden was there. John Judge was there. And, a whole bunch of... I think Jim Douglas was there in 2009 as well. And we were so nervous around these people. And one of the things that we have sort of looked at as a fine example is the way that Canadian Cinderelly has been able to approach so many members of these communities, so many members of the community, like Vince Palmolera, for instance, and create such wonderful dialogue and such wonderful conversation on the internet. It's been a real point of inspiration and an example to us, and I think that we need more of it, too.
Yeah, good job for that, because there's a lot of... in the community, animosity, people don't get along, and that's an understatement, and it's a shame. So I don't think that'll end. It could be like that with any kind of research. Sometimes I bring up like cold fusion, whatever happened to those guys that thought they invented something, and so we have an opinion. It's the complete opposite of Vince Bugliosi. Mm-hmm. We do not feel that Oswald acted alone, and it's like an ostrich putting your head in the sand to ignore how the world really works. And in this case, it's like not just a gang shooting, it's the removal of a president.
I have one question. When you were in Dallas, did you get to meet Gary Mack?
Negative. We attempted to meet Mr. Mack on 3 separate occasions. He was busy for all 3, but I can report that his staff were very nice to us, although they did not let us take pictures even of the gift shop. We thought they had a nice gift shop, and we asked if we could take pictures of it, because one of the pictures in the gift shop of John F. Kennedy was taken by the grandfather of someone who I went to school with. But there are no pictures allowed in that museum at all.
It's against the law.
Really? They made that point?
I guess so.
Oh, God.
Certainly seemed like it.
Yeah, yeah.
Did those T-shirts that you saw saying that Oswald did it alone, did they say on the back that the CIA paid for the T-shirts?
I think that would have been said on the label too, like right on the back. Made at Langley, Virginia.
Yeah. Tell me about some of your experiences then, uniting some people, like you said that you've written to Robert Groden, and a lot of people in the community enjoy conversing with you. So you're kind of a catalyst, a unifying. The right word is, but
a focal point.
Yeah, focal point. Yeah, right. For people, because that's good, right?
Yeah, I like to encourage the hard work that everybody is doing. You know, I just want people to keep pushing on and pushing forward and bring some justice to this situation, because this is an unsolved murder. You know.
Yeah, and I guess we all feel that John Kennedy was an important person. It wasn't as if, and I don't want to use anybody else's name like Nixon or George Bush, but it's just like it so happens in our history, things would have would have happened for the better. Mm-hmm. That it was on the right path, and it was just against, I hate to say greedy big money, but big money that said, no, we got to stop this guy before he wrecks it for us.
One of my favorite lines is, Fletcher Prouty said to David Ratcliffe, I believe it once, that that John F. Kennedy had an enormous or a tremendous ability to, or had a tremendous confidence in his ability to manage situations. And so when he became president and when he saw problems in the way that the system was working, he didn't try to fight all 12 rounds at once. He would take them in order. And when you really examine the daily papers that were coming out of his administration and you put it into the context of the larger historical events that took place during 61 to 63, you can see that the president was preparing in his first term for his second term in office. And in his second term, he was going to make decisions that would have moved mountains. And we can see him preparing for it, but he did not live to execute the plan. So
there would have been no Vietnam War.
Yeah.
That would have been it.
Yeah, and I found interviews with Professor Galbraith, the son of the former ambassador in the Kennedy administration to India. He was on an Irish talk show, I think about 2 years ago. And, the topic of John F. Kennedy came up. And the narrator of the television show said, well, wasn't John F. Kennedy responsible for Vietnam? And Professor Galbraith responded immediately, my father was opposed to Vietnam from the start, and he was able to convince Secretary McNamara and President Kennedy that the United States should not be involved in a military fashion. And, had Kennedy lived, there would not have been that kind of engagement. But he clarified a little bit further. He said it's not even so much a question of what would he have done if he had lived. The question more specifically is, what did he do when he was alive? And what Professor Galbraith was referring to was this book right here. And he went on to say that we have all the records, we have all the official papers lined up, we even have the official decision itself, and in some cases we even have tape recordings of President Kennedy ordering that decision to be taken. So the record is very well firm, particularly on the Vietnam subject. We don't know specifically how it would have turned out, but we know for sure that it would have been a lot less violent.
Yeah. Okay, Canadian Cinderelly, I have a question for you. Tell me a little bit about your experiences in forums and the online research community, because we've been discussing that there are some problems that we can't seem to get the unity that we want, yet a lot of good people are making an effort to introduce the topic of Kennedy's removal to people who are not familiar with all, and in spite of the opposition from Bugliosi and the Sixth Floor Museum and even the website that McAdams runs, things like that say almost go back to sleep, a lone nut did it, and you guys are crazy for thinking anything different.
Well, I just want to say that there's a bunch of brilliant people around the globe who are working hard every single day to try and bring some truth to the subject. And then there's these amazing people, and yet they disagree on just one or two things, and then they have to bash each other. And it just takes away from the whole focal point of trying to find some justice in JFK's murder. And it's just upsetting to see everybody disband like that when they really need to bond and just work together. Be friends also. It's just retarded.
Yeah. Well,
honestly.
I guess, we're we're trying to be a catalyst here of unity. I hope maybe that if I have a few more seminars in Hawaii, things like that, where I get, or maybe it'll be in a different city, maybe it'll be, but if people start speaking and here are the people that can sit down at a table and agree to talk about it and not worry about the small areas that we disagree, right? And then, so this is what we do agree on. Let's go forward with this, because not only are we trying to go forward, but there's a current, we're swimming upstream with the likes of this well-funded sixth floor museum. Mm-hmm. Or ad nauseum, as I call it.
And to my friends, David Williams, Jim Hamilton, and Stephen Duffy, never give up. You guys are awesome. And Bob Groden, I love you. Just never give up. Just keep pushing.
Yeah, it's a shame what they've been doing to Bob Groden.
Completely.
I mean, arrested 80 times or taken from the plaza 80 times, whatever it is, right? Time after time, it says, listen, you can't charge me with this. And then, as I was talking about with you guys previously, that the sixth floor has booked out the whole week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The document is already available on last week's show. For people who are not familiar with it, look under view document or view it's not affidavit, but maybe it's just application. It's shocking, and you guys have been there and you've seen Robert Groden in the it's kind of almost in rain and shine. He's there to promote.
Oh yeah, and it was a wonderful experience. We went up into the library first, and we saw his name on the list of contributors, and when we went down there, we there was a big lineup of people waiting to meet him, and we finally got to meet Rob, and Angie said, I noticed your name is up on the list of contributors at the sixth floor museum, and his eyes lit up, and he said, nobody ever notices that I contributed to that museum. I can't get any of those films back, but I personally think he was one of the nicest and most articulate researchers out there. He's willing to talk to just about anyone, and we're just horrified at what's happening to the guy. Least of which because we really want to read his new book. We were able to get most of his other materials, and I personally think that his documentary, The Case for Conspiracy, is probably just one of the best straight-up documentaries that was ever made on the topic.
Yeah. Now, I asked Aaron about the state of JFK research. Angie, do you have any views or suggestions? I mean, I know you guys are making a film and that's that, but have you come across an opposition to this like I have? Like for me, it started when I submitted a CD-ROM of Colonel Prouty that I made to the sixth floor, and they wouldn't even put it in the bookstore. No, we won't take that kind of. It's like, what? I can't believe it. You would even put it next to Posner's book or whatever. I mean, at least you should have. You would think a level playing field if you're a museum. So that was my kind of rude awakening and shocked the whole thing.
Yeah, well, the fundamental, the problem is that, people want the truth, and at the same time, they want to be recognized for their work. And it's so difficult when people have worked for so long on one aspect of the case or another aspect of the case to then have somebody either steal their work, which is one of the biggest problems in the community, or disregard their efforts. I think it's very important for people to recognize that ultimately it's us versus the rest of the world, and nobody really cares about the minute details. I mean, if anything, the JFK community should know that there are huge players out there, and the rest of us are completely inconsequential.
Completely.
And if we're too busy fighting each other, literally on the street, people, they have terrible looks for each other, like, oh, she has nicer pants than me, or, this person has that person has that. And they hate another person who has so much more in common with them than the people who really affect their lives in the future and affect their children's lives, So the community, like most of humanity, needs to be aware. I mean, the community knows, right? They know what they're up against. But the rest of humanity doesn't even know, right? And it's sort of like, if these people can know and then not say, gee, hating that other person is just like playing into the hands of what those who want to sideline the information want, you know. And it's like, you know, you got to recognize that, you know, people don't care, you know, they don't care about small details.
I'm thinking about like Copa and Lancer and the different people and the different researchers, and some people love Jim Fetzer and some people just hate him, and all the other people I could name, they like or they hate him. So there's no one leader. There's no one saying that this guy speaks for the whole research community.
Yeah, well, and
since there isn't that, that's
yeah.
what we're left with.
No, and at the same time, I mean, you look at something like Lancer. I mean, they have all kinds of funding, you know, and it's like they still don't touch certain very important, critical documents. We're talking about documents, man. We're not talking about like this piece of evidence or this, you know, witness testimony. We're talking about like an actual document that changed the history of the United States, or should have if Kennedy wasn't killed. You know what I mean? So it's like, right. How can you not, like, Lancer, to me, like, you sort of wonder, like, and that's the thing, is that you're, you know, in the community, they're aware of, like, what potentially could be out there to, you know, destroy the credibility of the community or fragment it. Mm-hmm. And so you're sort of like, you don't trust people. You know what I mean? And then you see somebody else maybe they're doing really good research. Maybe they were misled by somebody else, right? But, like, you don't trust them because you think maybe they have some other agenda. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
that's
think
my position
at
with
arm's
some
length,
people.
I know, because I know that there's some people like McAdams, like Posner or Bugliosi that at least I know where they stand. Mm-hmm. But there are other people that I maybe just don't agree with, and I don't know where I stand with them. I don't know, is this person disinformation, you know, mm-hmm. or is it just I just don't agree with them? Mm-hmm. You know, and there's a few people, and so I'll pick a name out to say Judy Baker in the story. I'm not sure, you know, I drag my feet in that. I'm not really going to wave the flag, and I'm not going to tell people that, yes, I support that, and I'm 100% in agreement. I'm just wondering, like, how did this story come out of nowhere? And again, it's another story about Lee Oswald. And that was one tip that Fletcher had given me. He said, ever notice every year there's another book written about him. And and if you say, he didn't do it, yet there's still so much research that goes on about him, right? And I don't know if I'd already mentioned this, but it's just that, well, some people want to know to the nth degree that for sure he didn't do it. But, you know, Erin was saying as soon as she saw the Zapruder film the first time, that was it. You know, when I looked at, I think, Commission Exhibit 399, no way. There's just no way 399 did anything. Not that bullet, anyway, no matter what bullet was found. And, you know, with the great work that Doug Weldon had done with a bullet hole through the windshield, and everyone else who has done work and contributed something to it that no one person. I think Jim Douglas is close, that I would say that, you know, that guy could get up and lecture any kind of class, any kind of university class or any kind of function and say, you know, here's what we know. And I feel very confident and comfortable letting him speak. Where other people, I'd say, I'm not so comfortable letting them speak because they share my view only to a certain degree. And we're still, well, I guess we're all at the same time searching is there a spokesman? And, you know, I was kind of, even though I might not exactly agree with him, I was kind of rooting for Jesse Ventura. I was hoping that in his conspiracy show and more things would have led and he might have taken a bigger part in Black Op Radio from the year on and all that, because I had been talking with the Sun and about other ideas. You know, would he consider this? Would he do that? You know what? There was some things in the works that are not in the works anymore. And I think if he does anything, he may be running for president or vice president. You know, he may run as an independent, right? You know, so I think that the conspiracy, there's a third season of conspiracy theory, right? But I'm not sure if there'll be a fourth or a fifth. I think that I don't know for sure what'll happen, so I should leave it at that. But I don't think that he's going to spearhead a big convention and wave the flag of all JFK research. I think he was just at arm's length very interested. He'd read an awful lot about it. And so he was up to speed on a few things, right? And, he's such a public figure. I thought that was great that, people might say, well, there's a, Governor Ventura, saying that there's something wrong here, and we all need to look into it further. And so what you're mentioning is that the research community is fragmented, not by design, but with glee of the opposition. So as long as if Mac can say, well, I'm going to rope off Dealey Plaza, and if you don't pay your admission fee, you can't get down there. I think a lot of people will be upset. And then what do you do then? It's almost going to be a police state. I mean, a year from now or whatever. I mean, with what happened on New Year's Eve here, that they signed that into law. So there'll be a lot of changes, I think, in the next year and a half, or whatever, to the 50th anniversary. That they may not have a luxury of saying we're going to have a big visual. Protest is the wrong word. So of course, John Judge is going to have the moment of silence. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody was insulted to hear that for years that Penn Jones Jr. had maintained a moment of silence on the grassy knoll at 12:30, and he asked John Judge when he was getting ill and couldn't do it anymore and was passed away to maintain this tradition so people don't forget. And Gary Mack says we can't find paperwork documentation to back that up, so we're taking over. I mean, that's just
yeah.
Well, what was I going to say about? Money. Okay, so the number one problem with the community is money. There's this food chain at Dealey Plaza, mm-hmm. right? And Robert Grodin's at the top, and you've got all these people legitimately and illegitimately selling his work, and setting up booths of their own at times when he's not there. You've got this whole food chain, and you've got people ripping other people off, Like there's this guy Sherman who hangs around in the plaza, and I knew him right from the get-go. He asked James for $20 and, can he get his car jacked? And James is like, yeah, sure, because he's nice and he wants to include everybody in the community. But anyway, so this is what I'm saying, is that the money is the biggest problem because it's such a fringe topic, and most books don't sell in any genre anyways very well, let alone books on the assassination, right? It's such a minute genre. There's so little money to be had. And primarily people are fighting over money. Mm-hmm. They're fighting over the rights to the information. And the thing is that in 20 years, most of them will be gone, but the information's still there and it's locked away. And that doesn't do any good. So, I mean, really, if JFK basically knew he was in trouble and sacrificed his life and died, you think maybe we could, you know what I mean? Give the information away for free, right? And share it with people. That's what I think is fundamentally wrong. And that's why we're giving the film away for free. We're making it a copy-wrong film, not a copyright film. Because you couldn't make this film if you wanted to do it legally, You couldn't buy the rights to all the footage, even if you were Oliver Stone, You couldn't go around, getting all this obscure footage and getting all the rights and then having a production company approve your idea. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I was surprised to hear that it's the fourth debate of Kennedy and Nixon is still held and they're not releasing the copyright.
James found that out, much to his chagrin.
Yeah, I was really hoping to be able to watch that fourth debate on the internet. And the first debate is real easy to get. It's on YouTube. The second and third debates are kind of rare, but you can buy it in DVD format. And the fourth debate, which is the foreign policy debate, and probably the most important of all four of the first televised presidential debates, is held under a very special copyright, and you cannot get it. You cannot buy it. We found that all of the most sensitive information of this period of American history is held under bizarre copyrights. For example, all the original footage of the crime, was sold off to private companies. I mean, most notably the Zapruder film. And what's really important about the Zapruder film is that they didn't copyright the whole movie, as a motion picture. They issued a new copyright for each individual frame, and there are 513 frames, and each one has a new copyright. So that's why it took so long for the film to be shown publicly. Life magazine held the copyright, and they never issued that copyright as an actual film. The only reason why the people saw it was because people like Jim Garrison, Mark Lane, and most notably Robert Grodin, were able to obtain copies of it, were able to preserve copies of it. They were able to make it as easily understood as possible, and when the time was right, they were able to deliver it to their audience.
You had mentioned a story recalling that one of the people who had developed the film, am I correct, that said that when he'd seen it later, it was not the same film he saw?
He said that it looked nothing like the film that he saw. Now, what we're talking about is contained on a DVD called it's a DVD called Image of the Assassination, and it's a MPI film. It was made in concert with Life magazine, and it's basically a documentary just on the film itself. Now, in the special features of the DVD for this film, and I'll send you a link to it afterwards. It's in the special features of this DVD, they have an interview with one of the men who operated the photographic machines that developed the film. Mm-hmm. And he sort of gives a basic account of, while I was here doing this, and then Zapruder and all these guys showed up, they made us sign legal waivers saying what we were going to do, and then we did it. And when we developed the film, and then when we were done, we all sat down and watched it for the first time. And what he said is that the film was needlepoint focus, not all blurry like these other ones. And so whatever has happened to the film since then, we can't say for sure, but that original copy was of a much higher quality.
And his quote again was,
that the film that he originally saw looked nothing like any of the other films that have been released since then. He said that basically, he's like, I've seen all these other movies and all of this, stuff that was released in Oliver Stone's film, and they all look blurry. They look really seriously blurry.